Okay, that says that we are live, and on my clock here it says 12 noon, which is 3 o'clock local time, because I'm actually not in Ireland yet again. For this month's Mojo Chat, I'm out in Qatar yet again, as I was last time. And today the topic for the discussion is it's going to be exploring the idea of the evolution of smartphones over the last 10 years and how that plays into, if you like, the future strategy for mobile journalism. So a hot topic, certainly for me, in the last, I guess, 3 to 4 weeks in particular, coming up to Mobile World Congress, was the idea of computational photography and how will smartphones overcome their limitations when compared to what some people refer to as proper cameras or professional cameras, or however you want to call it. So joining me today, on my screen, he's right there, but on your screen, he could be anywhere, is Wytse Vellinga, who will introduce himself in a second. And we're still trying to get Mark Egan in on the call. He's in a very, very poor connectivity area. And for fear that he is not going to make it, he's basically in advance sent a video that he shot actually at Mobile World Congress just over a week ago. And that video was an interview with, is it Oliver or Oscar? It's Oliver Schindelbeck, I think, from Zeiss. Because Zeiss, interestingly, have just partnered up with Nokia to create the Nokia PureView, which has got 5 cameras on it. So let's not go too far down that rabbit hole just yet. Let's get Wytse up on screen and have a quick chat about what the structure today is. So let me tap this button here, and hopefully he's going to jump up onto the screen here. 3, 2, there we go. Wytse, tell us all about who you are.
Hello.
Hey.
Well, I'm Wytse Vellinga. I'm a broadcast journalist from the north of the Netherlands. I work for the public broadcaster Omroep Friesland, exclusively on mobile phones. So that means I do my radio, TV, and online work just on mobile phones. And next to that, I'm a MOJO trainer and one of the experts working for Thomson Foundation.
Very good. And the reason you're in your car today is...
Well, it's a difficult story. They're doing construction work in my house, and it's a bit loud. So this is basically the only quiet spot I have. So this is welcome to my studio.
Yeah, it's very Mojo.
Yes, it is.
It's very Mojo. Okay, very good. So both of us have been involved in this game, I guess, from the very, very early days. We've seen various iterations of phones and accessories and all sorts of other stuff come and go. Will we do a quick recap? Because right now there are 13 people who are live on the platform, with another 120 potentially joining us. And of course, this broadcast is also going out on both YouTube and Facebook. Can I just say, if you are watching us on either YouTube or Facebook, the only place that you can interact with us directly is within the Crowdcast platform. So Sarah, I think, from the Thomson Foundation, Sarah from the Thomson Foundation is online at the moment, I think, as well. And she may go back and forth between Facebook and Crowdcast, copying and pasting over questions or comments. But please do interact, because we're interested to hear your thoughts on this as well. And one of the nettles that I'd like to grab during this conversation is this discussion about quality. Quality technical definition of it versus quality aesthetic definition of it, and then that ever overarching conversation which we've grasped before when we have Philip Bromwell and Caroline Scott from journalism.co.uk talking about the notion of produced versus raw. We might dip our toe into that water a little bit today as well, because I do think we're doing a compare and contrast between the kind of high-end camera aesthetic that smartphones are starting to acquire. I think that really then comes back to this idea, like, is Mojo strictly the preserve of high-end broadcast people, or is it something for everyone, or where do you find your niche in the middle? But we won't answer that up just yet. First of all, let's just do a quick look backwards, so where we've come from. So Wytse, what was the very, very first, can you remember, very, very first smartphone that you shot a story with?
That was the Nokia Lumia 1020, and that was Windows Phone, as you might remember, which had a whopping 41 megapixel camera, and that's why I got it. And basically that was the smartphone that got me into mobile journalism, because I thought, hey, if my camera is this good, why should I bring one of those big TV cameras if I can get this out of my smartphone? So that was the very first one. But it had some issues.
Yeah, so I don't want to go on a Microsoft hater type routine or anything here, but I mean, it's probably worth stating why, if Microsoft are so early to the game with such a high resolution camera, why did that device ultimately fail? What are your thoughts?
Well, really, it's not Microsoft that built that one. That was Nokia, and Nokia was really investing in camera quality, and that all went downhill when Microsoft bought Nokia. They basically bought it and killed it because Windows system was the core business they were in, and they didn't focus on anything else anymore. And I think that's where it went downhill.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from a business point of view, the problem always was that I think when Microsoft acquired Nokia, the biggest market share that they managed to reach with the Windows platform on mobile was about 3 to 4% globally.
Yeah. Yep.
So that made it a tough sell to app developers. And, you know, I guess what would you spend on a high-end production app or a photography app? 40, 50 grand to develop at minimum?
Yeah.
It's a hard sell if you don't know what your return on investment is going to be because the user base is so small. Okay, so that's where you came from. I mean, my one, I think the first story that I played with, not strictly shot, it was an iPhone 4 actually, and it was probably back in 2011, 2012. I'm trying to remember exactly, but it was on one of the courses for CIRCOM over in Budapest. And I was just kind of, you know, just playing, messing around as you do, hacking stuff together and seeing what happens. I was back, we had the, do you remember the Fostex AR4i, the little black box that your phone goes into?
Yes.
For all its good and ill, you know, it was pretty early. Like, think about it, that was 6, 7 years ago. Like, it was pretty early into the game for stereo sound into your smartphone. Which was,
absolutely.
You know, back then, it's worth noting that the quality of the iPhone 4 was just 720p. It was the 4S that introduced 1080 full HD quality. It's come a long way, but I do think, and I think it's a real topical issue that I think we'll probably grapple with this year at MOJO Fest, is has Android finally overtaken iOS in relation not just technology and innovation, but also in relation to the whole MOJO workflow. I mean, a lot of the manufacturers I'm talking to are telling me that they're now also offering, or going to very soon offer, USB-C versions of their external accessories like microphones and things.
Yep.
We know at some stage this year that, for instance, Adobe Premiere Rush Creative Cloud, full name, is going to launch Android as well. It's had a head start on iOS already, and certainly from everything I've read, it's certainly managed to capture a very, very big captive audience extremely quickly. So there's some really, really exciting things happening, right?
Yeah, and we saw it working on the Samsung platform, the S10, when they announced it. There was also Adobe Rush really integrated into that phone, which is a big deal for anyone wanting to create content with a phone. If a company like Adobe jumps in and collaborates with Samsung to make something especially for it.
Yeah, and I got the impression from that launch that effectively Rush is going to be like the default video editor on Samsung. Like that's a big deal. I mean, think about the size of the user base.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge deal, and not just in the editing, but also in the filming. That you have this app that can do everything already on your phone. I think that's next generation.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's fairly revolutionary, and I think it's going to be very interesting to watch it. I mean, it's only on the market. So November it launched, so it's really not that long. So I mean, it's relatively early days. I think it's probably still version 1 on iOS, but certainly I think the roadmap of it is going to be very interesting going forward. We still have the stalwart stuff, which you know, for pretty much everyone that I've found over the last 6, 7 years, the camera app of choice has been Filmic Pro predominantly. Yes. We look at other occasionally too if it gets buggy, but most it's pretty stable on both iOS and Android. And on the editing side, I guess you're a fan of LumaFusion as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's the editor I work with every day.
Yeah, I mean, Kina Master on Android is you know, it's reasonably close rival, but I think LumaFusion definitely has a good neck and shoulder head start about it, right?
Yeah, the biggest problem with Kina Master is that it's basically not made for professionals. It's made for the broad audience, and then if you use it professional, it gets clunky. You can't do what you want to do. So you have to refer back to a laptop, which is not something I want to do. So Kina Master is not up to scratch yet.
Right. I know they have a big development team working on it. I've actually visited their offices in Seoul. So, I mean, you know, I'm sure that their roadmap, particularly now with the advent of Adobe Rush basically coming out in Android, is going to up the game, I would imagine. Well, they'll have to. It's 5, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the photography stuff. Let's talk about kind of the evolution of this. So my hypothesis over the years has been that because Mojo is still somewhat, I guess, of a niche movement, certainly in broadcast, I think it's got a broader user base for social media and stuff. Broadcasters is somewhat niche.
Yeah.
I always felt that the missed opportunity was that some big brands like, it could be Nikon, it could be Sony, or it could be Canon, that they would basically make some sort of a hybrid device that basically would allow you to dock your phone. Not what Samsung has done with the Galaxy range that they had, where it was basically a mirrorless camera, but with a phone operating system. But something that wasn't necessary that your phone could clip into that would give you all the power and potential of a mirrorless or a DSLR camera, but with the full operating system, basically the phone. But no one has really gone down that route. I mean, the closest thing I can think of was the DX01, which is now discontinued. But
yeah,
I mean, that was.
And Sony with its lenses, you could connect through a sort of a Wi-Fi that you can connect to your phone. Just a lens, that's it, and it works from your phone. But also that's discontinued, so apparently no market for that. Yeah,
well, I mean, I think Sony made a couple of boo-boos in that, again, not to go bashing specific ones, but using NFC and Wi-Fi for the connectivity rather than going for a hardwired connection was a fundamental flaw. Fundamental flaw. Yes, because you had latency issues straight out of the box, and that was what, from my opinion, I think that's what killed it. And if they had actually modified it and had it so you could use the USB connection directly into the phone, it might have actually transformed those devices. I still have two of them sitting in boxes and haven't used them in 2 years.
I have one laying in the attic and haven't used it for at least 2 years, maybe even more.
And that kind of brings us to the point. So the add-on accessory market, and all these devices I've talked about, like the DX01 and the Sony QX range, all those devices were up around the €250 to even €450 mark. Like, they weren't cheap accessories.
No.
And even the likes of the Zeiss ExoLens, just hardware lenses, which have now also been discontinued, like all of those were relatively expensive external accessories. So what certainly seems to be the norm now in the last 2 years, I guess, is that the phones come with multiple cameras rather than having to add on lenses and stuff to compensate for lack of zoom or whatever. Yeah. And certainly the announcement from, I think we'll talk about foldable in a while, the Samsung, it's the Galaxy S10, I guess. The idea of the three, there's an ultra wide, there's a wide and zoom, is that right?
Yeah, that's it. A tele, a wide, and an ultra wide. Yeah.
Didn't you make a comment on Twitter, something about the ultra wide and whether it's useful or not useful?
Well, if I could choose between lenses that I really need, the ultra wide would not be on my list. The normal lens on a smartphone tends to be rather wide already. So ultra wide was not on my list. On my list was more zoom. I mean, the 2x tele is nice to have, but in a day-to-day journalistic basis, I have to have some more zoom.
Right. So that brings us to the announcement that also came out at Mobile World Congress about the Oppo, which is, I'm going to be perfectly honest, it's a camera manufacturer or a phone manufacturer I hadn't heard of before. I have to be brutally honest. But they've put forward a fairly revolutionary proposal. Did you follow that launch or the press release that came out about it?
Yeah, I saw it. 10x zoom via a periscope kind of system. I don't know really how that works, but it gives you 10x zoom. So if they can actually make that work, that would be really revolutionary. But I'm not quite sure if it works yet, because the only thing they showed was like a concept phone. It's not actually in a phone yet. So
I don't know if I recorded it. I might have been bold and screen captured this. There was a clip that was published, I think, by The Verge just before it at Mobile World Congress, and their CEO from Oppo had basically just put a teaser video out, which in theory anyway, whether it was artificially created or not now, and a few of the brands that were on this doing aesthetic photographs from a phone that were actually taken on a DSLR. I won't name names, but two of the big brands have been caught out rotten on that. And I'll see if I can find the video, because I have to say, when I saw it, I have it. So I don't know if this is going to translate onto the screen very well, but let's give it a go. So this was a video that was basically shared by the CEO of Oppo. Okay, I don't know if you can see the zoom level, but at the bottom, he's basically scrolling across on the screen. Right now it's 2.4x, and this is using their 10x technology, zooming all the way in. And this is the Familia Sagrada in, is that how you pronounce it, in Barcelona, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's pretty, you know, like, that's pretty seamless. We don't see the device that it's running. It's just a screen capture of it. But the technology, again, this is fairly lo-fi as a demonstration, isn't it? But this is the way the technology works. So one lens array is pancaked, it's flat down into the body, but the other one is at a right angle. So it uses a right angle prism to allow you to do inside in the body of the phone. So it doesn't really make the phone much thicker, but it actually does give you this idea of magnifying beyond, if you like, the scale of the actual magnification on the pancake lens. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and if it actually works, and I've heard a rumor that the next Huawei phone will have one of those telescope lenses as well, then it really is a game changer, because then there's basically nothing you can't shoot with a phone anymore. I've been telling people who start shooting with a smartphone that zoom is the one thing they're going to miss. And if the phone builders can now bring it into the smartphones, then yes, that is a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, I still think, like, was it at CES? I think it was CES 2018 that Canon announced these little module cameras that were prototypes. They never strictly said they were going to production, but they were claiming that those little prototype cameras, which, if I remember rightly, had a 1-inch sensor, that they would be capable of 30x optical zoom. Now that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
I don't know how they managed to get it into a body that's about this big. Like, if you manage to have that as an add-on for both USB-C and for Lightning, that would transform mobile journalism in the morning. That basically means the core limitations of MOJO, which have been traditionally zoom, exactly as you've said, and low light photography, which we'll come to in a second with the Pixel 3. But those two big obstacles effectively will have been overcome. Like, that's pretty transformative, right?
Absolutely. But yeah, like you said, I haven't seen it in actual daily use yet, and I'm always afraid to comment on something that's just a prototype.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I'm going to post a couple of links to this stuff. I did dig out earlier on so that we'd at least have some stuff to share. So I'll post this link into the system right now. This is the thing in relation to this Canon lens that I've just talked about, with a link to The Verge if anyone is interested in following up on that one. And then this is a link to the press release again from The Verge. This is about the Oppo 10X lens system that we're just talking about right now. And while we're doing that, Corinne has joined the conversation, and she has a question over here. Can you select which lens it uses? I probably should have caught that a little bit earlier, because I'm not too sure which camera we're talking about. If it is the Oppo one that you're talking about, based on that video that I showed, it's continuous. So you don't actually have to select a lens. It literally just is, you keep zooming it transform from the pancake to the periscope lens. So that's seamless. But if it's the Nokia PureView, which we've yet to talk about, then I don't think you do select the camera, because in a clip which I will now share in a second, which is the clip that Mark asked me to share in the app in the event of him not being able to join us. I hope I can find it. It clearly kind of uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to combine the 5 lenses into a single lens. And he said one thing which I thought was really interesting. If you're interested in this, I strongly invite you to watch. Don't know where it is on your screen, but that video, that YouTube link to Mark's video, I just posted, because Oscar from Zeiss talks about how they basically can use a 1,200 layer depth map. Deep and go, what is he talking about? So if you've no idea what the hell depth mapping is, just tiny bit of back reference in this one, then have a look. If you have an iPhone, have a look for an app called Focus, Focos. Because one of the things that I absolutely love about Focus, and I know Mark is a fan. Are you a fan, Wytse? Do you use it at all?
No.
Okay, so one of the things that I really, really like is if you have one, and I don't have it on this phone. I do. One of the things is if you have a phone that is 2 lenses, then what Focus allows you to do is just, if I just take a picture and then, oh, I can't see the screen. I'm actually going blind. I'm pretty sure. Not really good, is it? If I do this, look, what it does is it allows you to view the depth map. As you slide your finger across, you can actually see the layers, the foreground and the background, and all the individual layers that it has actually sensed. So it's measuring depth in the same way that your eyes measure depth. It's using offset between camera 1, camera 2, to give you some sense of depth and distance. But using the 5 cameras on that new Nokia PureView, he basically said that the depth map will be so detailed that it can actually be used for 3D video, which is pretty interesting, I think.
Absolutely.
So transformative. and different non-apertures. You got to be careful with the wording. Let's get the wording right. So not different apertures, but I think he talked about different exposures. So for HDR, basically, you know the way if you take a HDR shot with your iPhone right now, if it's a moving object, you get this really bad distortion because the shots are sequential. But with 5 cameras, they shoot instantly at different. And as a result of that, you get a much more dynamic 5-level HDR map, which is pretty bloody exciting as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, for photography, this is a revolution. We've seen the Light L16 camera. You remember that one?
The same technology, right?
Same technology, and they put that technology in a smartphone, which is for photography is perfect. But yeah. I'm not so sure it works for video. I haven't heard any comments about video whatsoever. So
that's a fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point. But if the computational, and he, again, your man Oliver in that video clip, he talked about the fact that they developed extra chips, extra processors specifically for the Nokia PureView to be able to deal with this. If we're at the point where the processing power, I mean, let's face it, like most of the premium smartphones in the market are now at desktop level processing power, and multi-threading and multi-core and all the rest of it. So we're probably not far off. I'll take a wild guess and say a year or two away from the ability to certainly do this at 25 to 30 frames per second.
Absolutely.
Like if it's, you know, like it's definitely on the horizon, I think, right?
Yeah. Wish it was here already.
Yeah, well, you know, again, but in some ways, like this has been a discussion quite recently within the community, I guess, which is the implementation of mobile journalism at a professional level, continually slow adoption rates in broadcasters, and how there be peaks and they try it and they drop it, and they try it and they drop it. I do feel part of that is probably because there's never really been one completely holistic, versatile, and Mojo-centric solution on the market, software-wise. There's plenty of hardware out there that works, but it's the software and the workflow and streamlining and getting content back that, for me, certainly from a training environment, has always been the biggest challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although Rush may be addressing that stuff, one would hope.
Yeah.
There's comments from Bryn again here. No, it's the Samsung S10 Plus that she's talking about. A bit in the dark on how to use multiple lens smartphones because I'm still on a 6S Plus. Okay. And then Deborah, someone must have responded to her somewhere else because there's another answer there from someone. I think it could be Deborah. As a Mojo trainer, I'll ask this question. Do you think we will find ourselves training people how to use specific phones versus what is at the moment is just specific tasks? I think the complexity of phones is fast getting to the point where you probably need to be able to focus on specific models rather than just deliver generic training. I think this actually, in some ways, this addresses that thing that I kind of alluded to earlier, which is this idea of who are the Mojo community? Who are these people? What do they do? What do they create? I think in the broadcast environment, where you're trying to diversify your content production model and have more people shooting in the field, a very sensible approach in that model is to have a standardized phone for acquisition, both for support and for kind of mobile device management reasons. Those things that big companies need to worry about. The bring your own device model, which I know is a thread on the MojoFest group at the moment on Facebook, but the bring your own device model is fraught with challenges, not least of which is when you start in a class of 10 randomers, you're going to have people saying, oh, I have 30 meg left on my phone and I can't delete any of my apps and my photographs. And it's like, well, what do we do that then? So, there's all those challenges. I'm sure you've encountered this as well, Wytse, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you have people in the same room in the training bringing a Samsung S4 and, well, the latest Sony phones with 3 lenses and massive screens. And to have one workflow that works on all those phones, it's just impossible. Even if you have one brand, the difference between a smartphone from 2 years ago and a smartphone from now, what works on that phone, you can't be sure.
Yeah, that's the challenge. So I think it really depends on what the ultimate output path is and what are the channels that content's being pushed to. If you're trying to introduce this on a big organizational level, and also where there are pockets of any sort, deep or otherwise, but where there are pockets and there's budgets basically, then a holistic solution basically built around one specific device and one, either a single app or a small group of apps is definitely the most sensible approach. But then this also looks at this idea of Mojo in the broadest possible sense as being a platform for giving a voice to people who otherwise wouldn't have a voice. And I know when we had that conversation with both Philip and Caroline, they both referenced Yusuf and hashtag our stories, their stories, hashtag our stories, on their kind of idea of the device is irrelevant. It's all just about the story. And of course, their objective is to publish, not to TV. Their objective is to publish to social media, specifically Snap, I guess, right now, because that's where the funding is. But yeah, so it's a different case study, isn't it? I mean, the kind of rules are slightly different for when you're creating that kind of raw content.
Absolutely, because people might not even trust it if it's too slick, if it's too professional. Although I kind of hope that even the civic journalism, what that is for social media, will also build into a more quality approach, because there's so much people doing that, so much competition, that they will bound to try to get better and better to beat the competition. So from my personal perspective, I would hope that they will build quality in both how they do it and in the stories itself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if I was to be critical, and I do sound like a really old guy when I say this, I know I'm starting to look like one as well, that's another story. I do feel that when you get this kind of frenetic kind of piece to camera style content storytelling, which is quite, what's the word? Perhaps ego-driven or personality-driven, maybe is a better word for it. You know, I personally find that tedious after a while. I get the whole vlogging thing. My wife is a vlogger, blah blah blah, but it's slightly different when it's just handheld talking to camera for long tracks. You know, so yeah, I have mixed feelings about the whole thing, to be honest.
I agree.
Let's bring it back to the computational photography. So we talked about the fact that one of the key weaknesses within the full suite of mobile devices that are out there right now is Zoom, but that it looks like there are technology solutions that are starting to address that. Interestingly, the one takeaway from Mark's video is that that's one route that Nokia did not go down. So I explicitly remember Oliver saying that they did not have 3 or 4 different focal range cameras, that they were all exactly the same focal length. Yeah. And they were using machine learning and a very high resolution sensor to be able to actually do digital zoom, but lossless in HD. So it's just quite an interesting proposition. And then the other Achilles heel is because the sensors are so small, low light performance. But I know you're quite an Android fan, so have you had your hands on any of the Google Pixel phones? Like I've seen image samples from, what do they call it, night view or night mode or something on the Pixel?
Night side, I believe.
No.
I don't have a Pixel phone myself, but I have a colleague who has one, and I've seen some spectacular in the dark photos, but nothing you can do with some of the other Android phones if you know what you're doing. If you use third-party apps like ProShot or any other photography app, you can get pretty decent results in the dark.
Are these ones that do additive exposure? So it's like it's actually like almost compiling 4 or 5 exposures on one to brighten up the image, that type of thing. Yeah. So that's the technology that the Huawei P20 Pro uses, and I have to say I've got one, and I shot with that recently enough, and I was blown away by the low light stuff. It way outperforms the iPhone in low light that way.
Right. Yeah. Well, I have the Samsung S9, and it's way better in the dark than the iPhone is. Also because it has you can switch between the lenses and then make it into a composition, you know.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So looking forward, like we know, we can see fairly clearly that I think for all the manufacturers, the emphasis now slowly shifting away just from what you can do with the still image to what you can do with video. Clearly, portrait mode, which is, you know, it's been around now, I guess, 3 years. It launched on Samsung before it launched on iOS. But portrait mode, this idea of artificially creating the same visual effect as shallow depth of field that you get with DSLR, that's fast, I think, getting to the point that we may see that appear in video in the next, again, 1 to 2 years. It's all computational, depends on the processing power of the phone, and presumably it depends on connectivity as well. I presume an element of that is going to happen in the cloud. But that then brings us to 5G, which apparently the foldable phone was the other big talking point at Mobile World Congress. So what do you think?
Well, it's too soon to tell, really, because we don't have 5G networks anytime soon. So it's nice to have 5G phones, but it's not here yet. So it's too soon to tell. But if it really works the way they explain it and the way they promise, then it will be far more easy to go live with good connectivity and to send in your material. So it could be a boost, but I'm pretty happy with 4G actually.
Interesting. Okay, so what I know, it's not been ratified as a standard. That's something that comes up repeatedly when 5G is mentioned, that there isn't a uniform standard for 5G yet. So I think Ericsson are pretty close to probably getting that standard pushed through. We'll see. But for you watching, you might be going, what the hell are they talking about? 4K, 5G? I don't know. Well, 5G is the next generation mobile phone network. And on paper, right now anyway, the claims suggest that 5G will be capable of a minimum of 10 times faster data throughput, with a peak maximum throughput value of up to 100 times that of 4G, which, to translate it into real world times, is up to gigabit per second speeds to your phone, which is pretty bloody remarkable. Whether it'll be a real value out in the Wild West, if you like, is another question, but that's what they're saying on paper anyway. But going back to your point, Wytse, about the live streaming stuff, you know of, I've forgotten his name, but he's in TV2 in Denmark, and they've had a trial test bed of 5G going for the last 12 months. And something he said to me at an EBU conference there last year was this idea that network slicing is an option on the 5G product, that you can get guaranteed bandwidth. So if you're a user like a broadcaster, you can basically, you pay a premium, of course, still a hell of a lot cheaper than €500,000 worth of sat truck though. So basically you pay a premium for connectivity, for guaranteed bandwidth, which would be a step up from quality of service, which is the best that you could get on G network, which, you know, it gives you a percentage but never guaranteed actual bandwidth. So that's quite a big deal, I think, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. If that's the what they can actually bring, then it is a big deal. Yeah.
So looking forward, right? Dust off the crystal ball. Like you've been through the ringer no more than myself. I'm sure you've had the same challenges with people, traditional cameramen and everyone pushing back against mobile and the quality and the aesthetic and all the rest of it. But like, I mean, would you feel that we're fast approaching the inflection point for all of the kind of technical arguments about the limitations of MOJO are about to fall away? I mean, or have we passed that already? What do you think?
Well, we're close to it, because I see broadcasters and companies that used to be very against it, now slowly adopting it. And I think that is because the technology keeps evolving. So it gets more and more professional. And I think it will be a standard procedure for, at least for broadcasters, to have MOJO in their package.
Yeah, and I mean, I get my message as well is like, and certainly that the market for training has changed a lot in the last 12 months. Not just broadcasters anymore, because a lot of them are developing in-house staff to do it. Now it's more and more brands and companies realizing that they can leverage staff in-house rather than pay €3,000-5,000 a day to bring in stuff. They realize they can do it themselves.
Yeah.
But I'm strongly pushing all of them to stop. When they look at hardware solutions, I'm saying stop thinking of it as a mobile phone and start thinking of it as a complete creative suite. Like it's a camera, it's an edit suite, it's all that stuff. Stop saying, oh, you want us to spend €1,000 on a phone, or in the case of the Samsung Fold, €2,000 on a phone.
Yes.
Which brings us nicely on to foldable. What are your thoughts? What do you think?
I think the technology is very interesting, especially from a editing point of view. I mean, having a bigger screen that just folds out and you can work with your material on a bigger screen, that is really helpful, but not at this price. I mean, €2,000 for a phone, I would not pay that ever. I have a hard time paying $1,000 for a phone. I think that's even a bit much. Knowing everything that it can do and how much it can improve your workflow, but it's just too expensive.
Yeah, so I mean, the danger is, and I mean, this is something that Samsung is definitely going to encounter. I mean, if you look at market share for Apple, not market share, if you look at sales revenue, Apple, since they released the XS Max, which was the XS Max, or the X was the one that broke €100 price point. Like I bought an XS Max at Christmas, and without a SIM card, off contract, it was €1,750. And it broke my heart. It broke my heart to do that, because next to it, in the shop that I bought it in, was a MacBook Pro for €1,700. And I'm literally going, ooh, wow.
Yeah.
So I think the problem is that there is definitely a sweet spot where if they question the boundaries, compensate for market loss, just driving the price up, people will eventually, I think, push back, as it appears they've already started to do, and say, well, I can buy an entry-level DSLR and a decent MacBook Pro for that money.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is really the danger that the smartphone builders are facing now, because looking at what Apple does the last couple of years, it's nothing revolutionary. The only real revolution is in the price, that it keeps upping the price, and Samsung is doing basically the same. But you see those smaller smartphone builders build mid-range phones that are almost as good as those flagship models, but cost half of that money, like 500, 600 euros. For example, the Nokia PureView, the Nokia 9 PureView is I think 600 euros.
That's a pretty amazing price point, right?
Absolutely.
Mm. And even the Huawei P20 Pro off contract, if you remember, certainly in Ireland anyway, I saw a P20 Pro, I think it was the 128 gig version of it, but it was like 699 or maybe 750 or something, like much, much more competitively priced than either Apple or Samsung.
Yeah, and if you really want to grab a big share of the market, I don't think you should go higher than maybe 800-900.
Yeah, I mean, I would say an absolute ceiling of $1,000. I think once you cross $1,000, you've kind of, I think you've possibly burned half your bridges effectively and lost the very essence of what was unique about mobile, which is accessibility.
Absolutely. Yes.
Interesting times. Okay, I'm just having a quick filter down here along the comments, or maybe it has gone past that. No, it hasn't. Okay, so not a lot of comments. Matt, I think it is. He's just posted a link to another Oppo phone, also sporting a 10x zoom. I'm going to post links for anyone who's joined us. We have 16 people online at the moment who are not interacting a lot, but you're welcome to. We'd like to hear what you have to say. One of the things I just about to post was an article that I picked up on the Mobile Motion Film Festival website recently, which talked about Samsung last October touting an 8K image sensor. Not resolution now, but 8K video. That's different. So the P20 Pro has a sensor that would be capable of 8K, but it doesn't have the processing power to do 8K. But the other thing about 8K, if you combine it with your optical lens solutions, is that you can have double whatever the optical lens solution is. So if you have 10x optical periscope lens with an 8K sensor at the back of it, potentially if you're generating HD footage, you can get up to 20x losslessly. That makes sense? At least.
Makes sense. That makes sense. Wouldn't?
Yeah, at least.
I would not use it though. Seeing how much 4K already takes from your battery and your storage, and the fact that the phone gets warm.
Processing questions. Yeah, that's a different baby, isn't it? But like most of the phones are coming, what, 8 gigs of RAM? It's kind of almost standard in premium phone. So if you were to think about your desktop computers are kind of running just 2-3 years ago, 8 gigs would have been seen as a lot of processing power on a desktop, Yeah.
True.
So we're fast getting to the point that they can certainly do the bloody heavy lifting. I just found a press release saying that the P30 from Huawei is due to be launched on the 26th of March in Paris. So that'll be one to watch to see what Huawei is in the mix. We know what Oppo's done, and we know what Samsung has just done, where they seem to push more towards the foldable phone rather than necessarily the lens technology, I guess. And what was the last thing I want to show? Yeah, so hold that to last. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's still some really interesting stuff going on, I think.
Absolutely, interesting times.
Yeah, big time. Okay, so I'm not picking up any more comments or questions. I'll give it another minute, and I'm just going to have a quick look at Twitter to see if there's anything there. Poor Mark, whatever the story is, we've lost him. He's lost in the digital ether, so he's not going to be joining us, unfortunately, because I know that he wanted to talk a bit about because he was at MOJO World Congress, so he's kind of on the ground. Obviously, he shot that video with all of his ice, but talking points maybe at Mobile World Congress right across the board were fundamentally 5G and foldable phones is what everyone apparently was talking about. So there you go.
Yeah.
No, that's not relevant either. Stephen has joined the conversation. Hi Glenn, useful stuff about 5G. Can you offer a website for information about that potential for broadcast slicing section of 5G? You mentioned about 31 minutes ago. Yeah. So that network slicing actually, I was told about it from a real world test even. I just need to remember the name of the guy in TV2 in Denmark. I think his name is Morten Brandstrup, and it was in a conversation at an EBU event where he was telling me about their tests on it. But I mean, I think the interesting thing about it is, like, right here in Doha, when I'm on the way to the Al Jazeera Training Center, there are billboards, like massive billboards saying 5G, the future of mobile, blah, 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 blah. But people about it going, well, that's great. I mean, there is actually the first public 5G network available here in Doha, but no one has any devices to connect to it yet.
Yeah. And then last
technology, right?
And then last week there was a big congress in Barcelona, Mobile World Congress, where all about 5G phones, but no 5G network. So they should have combined the two.
Yeah, there you go. Just host it here instead of in Barcelona. Yeah. Oh my God. That will cause problems for saying that out loud. But anyway, so what I would suggest, even if you are interested in doing a bit more reading on it, is I know that Ericsson, who, like I say, they've been pushing really hard for the kind of standardization of 5G as kind of a network infrastructure. So if you do a bit of Googling for Ericsson 5G, you'll get loads of their white paper and reports basically on the kind of benefits that they're proposing. They're not the only ones putting forward the kind of the standardization, if you like, but they certainly, I think, probably one of the leaders, and I get a lot of emails from them basically with updates on what they're doing, and they seem to be certainly in the pioneering space for that. Yeah, so no other conversations. Okay, well, that's interesting. I'm just going to have a quick peek in here to see how many people are online, because 15 people showing up on my platform. Mark Guto, Corinne is there, Rick is there, Matthias is there, Jürgen, I don't know, Barbara, I don't know, Joe Dale is in the group, I know, Hossam from the Thompson Foundation, and Sarah from the Thompson Foundation there as well. So, Rick, Matthias, Guto, Mark, any comments, suggestions? I mean, two of these guys, you can probably guess which two, maybe, I don't know, but two of these guys are in BBC technology and training, so possibly have first-hand experience of some of this stuff, and certainly I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. But anyway, it's a conversation I think is going to continue to spill over, because one of the sessions that we've lined up for MOJO Fest in June is to explore the future of computational photography and where it's likely to go. And I think it's fair to say between now and June 6th, there's going to be a few more announcements. I can't say anything about breaking NDAs. There's going to be a few more announcements that are going to add a little bit of petrol to the fire, let's say, that I think is going to give people a lot of talking points. Which, hi Rick and Joe. So that brings us kind of nicely onto the plug I needed to give. So about yesterday, the day before, I know Wytse, you retweeted it, the Thompson Foundation, who hosts this platform, announced this year's MOJO Challenge, basically. So it's a mobile journalism competition that the Thompson Foundation run and fund. And part of the prize of that is a fully paid trip to come to MOJO Fest and press the flesh with the good and the great, like this guy over here, or there on your screen, or there, I don't know where he is, but and others basically from the MOJO community. Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this year's go, because I know, having watched it evolve over the last 3 or 4 years, almost every year, there's been a doubling of the amount of entries, which is pretty, sizable. It's pretty substantial to get double the amount of entries year on year. So that means that this year we should be on form for some in the region of 450 entries, which is going to be pretty big amount of people to wade through, I think, and shortlist, which will be interesting. But we've had some great winners in the past, Yusuf, and last year it was, I was going to say Gabriella. It's not Gabriella. Oh my God, she'll kill me if I can't remember her name. Oh, it'll come to me. Someone save me, please. Tell me, Corinne. Okay, here's the straw man question. We've talked about how specialized the phones are. The knowledge to manage multiple high-end phones and budget to try and buy them is concentrated in a tiny number of people. Most workplaces still gravitate towards everyone using their own phones. It's a problem. Does this mean we need to do more awareness raising with manufacturers? Thank you, Sam. Giselle Rodriguez, sorry. It was fantastic. And basically her story about the caravan in South America making its way to the US border was very, very emotive. Certainly I actually got quite wind up about it in the MOJO Fest Awards last year, talking about this idea of voice for the voiceless. Anyway, just go back to Corinne's point. To go back to one thing we kind of tipped on earlier on, so I think the idea of an inflection point and we're about to transition, I think is really quite telling. So I've had a lot of conversations with broadcasters over the last 12 months in particular, where they're becoming more polarized is the best way to describe it. So they're either going, they can see the potential in mobile, they realize that strategically they need to invest and start to upskill staff to be ready for this transition, or they become more entrenched. And if they become entrenched, then they're going the opposite direction, going, mobile's not good enough, we need to stick with big broadcast cameras, this is what we do, blah, blah, blah. But there's a couple of things in there that need to be borne in mind without going way off the script for this session. The first thing is, audience viewership from linear television is in decline. To varying degrees across different broadcasters, but it is factually in decline. I can't think of one off the top of my head that has managed to do a substantive growth in their actual consumer base for linear television, okay? And part of the reason that broadcast companies spend so much money, millions upon millions every year, is putting infrastructure in to be compliant with broadcast standards for linear television, okay? Not just for aesthetic, let's be honest. So the flip side of that is, as the audience migrate away from linear and from watching stuff that's being delivered over the traditional TV methodology to IP delivery, it opens up an opportunity to do more diversified content creation. That's where MOJO needs to be strategically placed, empowering more people in the field to tell more stories. Because I personally, in our newsroom, in the newsroom in RT, when I was there, where on every given day, there might be 50 or 60 stories pitched at the editorial meeting, only 15 to 18 of these could be commissioned because there was only room for 13 or 40 of them in the news bulletin each evening, and because simply there weren't enough resources to be able to address the other 30 or 40 stories. It doesn't mean those 30 or 40 stories were not worth having a platform and being told. It just meant that the business model did not facilitate them being made. Where mobile comes into its own, it gives you that ability. If you have the bodies on the ground, if you have the staff, you give them a phone, the training, and some accessories, and they can make those stories. And to me, it's a complete goddamn no-brainer, and it does still frustrate the life out of me that people are not seeing it for the true potential of what it is. Now, I'm really, really hoping, I don't want to leave a cat out of the bag, but on the MOJO Fest website this year, I have not announced any of our keynotes for this year, but one of the keynotes that I'm really, really, like, I can't express how much I'm hoping she's going to be able to make it. A woman that basically came on this year's Thompson Foundation Convergence course in London in the summer, and she's won an Emmy, Rory Peck Award. She's won incredible awards for the work that she's done as a citizen reporter, working in Aleppo. Her husband was a doctor and worked in the hospital in Aleppo, and she told stories that no other journalist was able to get because she was embedded in what was happening in Aleppo, and her stuff is mind-blowing. If you're interested to get a preview of the sort of stuff that she's done, then Channel 4, who she's now working for, has a microsite called InsideAleppo.com. And she, very soon, I'm told, launching a new documentary which charts the whole story of what happened to her and her family, basically, from when the war started in Syria to where she is now. I'm really hoping she's going to be at MOJO, because for me, she is MOJO personified. She is the epitome of the idea of giving a voice to the voiceless. In Syria, journalists were targeted by the Assad regime, specifically so they wouldn't tell the world what was happening. And that's a classic case of where mobile can be leveraged, and other cameras as well, for sure, but can be leveraged to get the message out. So I'm really hoping that she's going to be able to make it as our keynote. Anyway, I'm getting emotional talking about it, and if you look at InsideAleppo.com, you will see why. Now, someone has pitched in a couple of questions into the bottom of the platform, and we just see. That's the same question from Stephen. It was in here and in the question, and then there was a question down here from Mark. So, do you know anyone using P20 day in, day out for MOJO? I have confidence in the iPhone doing the job, but would feel nervous about a switch. It's an interesting one because it's come up once or twice within the. I've tested with the P20 Pro. Filmic Pro works perfectly fine on it. I've had no issues personally. I know there was one French journalist, I remember, who messaged quite a lot in the group talking about reliability issues he felt with sound on the P20 Pro. But like on two of the occasions where he had messaged me about it, I was able to cite examples where basically it was to do with noise in the environment, not specifically to the setup that he'd actually used. So I haven't tested enough in anger to be perfectly honest, but I would certainly be interested in trying to do a focused of testing it in anger, and we might try and do that around MOJO Fest this year just to see how it performs. Just for the record, as I do every year, I've invited the likes of Apple, who never come. Hey, there you go, and also Samsung, and I've tried to reach out to Nokia to see if they're interested in wandering along and having a chat about what their future strategy is. I think the key thing is that for all the big manufacturers, MOJO is of virtually no interest. based on my experience to date. They see it as being too niche and not a big enough audience to worry about yet. I think that will change. I think as everyone starts to get into this territory of extremely high quality photography, video will become the new battleground, as we've already discussed. And I think that's where professional content creation, not just for broadcast, but for online and everywhere else as well, will suddenly become the main focus of attention for those brands. So it's going to be interesting over the next 12 months. I don't know anything else I want to add. Wytse, is there any closing comments, thoughts, remarks you want to throw into the mix?
Well, maybe that it is a really interesting time with everything that's been going on. 5G, foldable phones, the different lens types. I think the next couple of months will maybe change how Mojo will look for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think we must both be aware of something that's coming down that neither of us can talk about. So just stay tuned to press releases over the next month or two, and you might get a sense of what's coming. But we're both under NDA clearly and can't talk about it. So, but yeah, I think it's fair to say that finally professional content creation on mobile is starting to get the attention it truly deserves. It's a real pity that Apple dropped the ball on it. I'm going to be brutal. They're probably going to blacklist me perpetually for saying this publicly, but they did. Apple, they could have been in at the cutting edge of this 2-3 years ago, and they've completely kind of dropped the ball because they didn't think the audience was big enough. And I think now the battleground is going to be between the likes of Samsung and Huawei. So let's just watch what happens next. Bianca has joined the conversation. She just commented, I use the P20 for a project once microphone attachment is an issue. Not all brands work. You have to use open camera and choose the mic to make it work. With filmic, the sound didn't pick up. Interesting, I didn't have that issue, but there you go. There's a real world example of it, Mark, to reiterate your point. I think the interesting thing about Huawei, and I'm not in manufacturers just for complete clarity, but I think the interesting thing about Huawei is that because they are, to a certain extent, market-wise, the underdog, I think they're actually very hungry, let's say, to find the niche and maybe capitalize upon it. So above all of them, they may be the ones willing to listen to the Mojo community and start to include that we as professional creators basically need. So let's just keep an open mind on that one. Maybe the P20 was not the solution. Maybe the might be something new. Final comments. Stephen says, one constant of Mojo, regardless of the phone model, is storytelling. Could we have a session on storytelling in future casts? Yes, absolutely. I know Wytse would be very keen. There will be a session at Mojo Fest this year, specifically on storytelling. A couple of different people lined up that I can't announce just yet who are fantastic storytellers, visual storytellers, different platforms. Wytse is included in that, of course, obviously, but I know that Philip has suggested in his new role, so congratulations to Philip for his new role as head of digital content platforms. I can't remember what the official title is. It's a great RT made up one, but it's a fantastic role for him. So he's offered to do a masterclass in storytelling, but I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get Mike back again, because he's done another phoning it in. Hopefully I'll try and get Scott Rensberger over, because Scott, last time he came, pulled a whirlwind behind him, and he's been in Galway with me recently doing a workshop, and everyone was raving about his stuff, so I think it would be great to get him back as well. And I suppose I can say it here anyway as an exclusive, so I'm 99% sure that Philip Bloom is going to reappear this year as well in Galway, so there's lots of very interesting people coming to Galway this year. Gratuitous plug. Anyway, on that bombshell, yes, Stephen, short answer, we will definitely look at a session specifically on storytelling. And that is it, I think, for this one, unless there's anything else you want to throw into the mix, Wytse. What are any parting words of advice?
Tell a good story.
There you go.
That's the basic.
Never mind the technology, just get stuck into the storytelling.
That's it. Yeah. So I'm very happy with the comment by Stephen. It's a very good.
Yeah, can't argue with that one.
No.
Okay, we're a tiny bit shy of the wrap-up time, but I think that's fine. I don't know where this is on your screen, but again, gratuitous plug for the platform. So basically, these live chats are part of the Journalism Now platform from the Thompson Foundation. And recently enough, I launched a new version of the mobile journalism course that I hosted on the platform since it launched. Wytse has contributed to that, and we've basically put out a free version now to get people effectively thinking. It's designed to be generic, so it's not platform specific the way the old one was. The old one was very much focused just on iOS, and that old one is soon to be the new one, because I was in London recently with the Thompson Foundation updating the modules and getting it ready to relaunch. So there's a lot of new content on that course when it does launch. That's the paid version. So that's it for this month. Actually, technically, it's probably been 5 weeks, I think, since the last one. So I apologize for that, but my schedule has been mental, and it's just life, I'm afraid, gets in the way of things occasionally. But hopefully we will see you back here in and around 4 weeks chat. And maybe, Stephen, that will be just about storytelling as opposed to the geekology that myself and Wytse are all slightly obsessed with. Anyway, for this month, thanks a million for joining in. Thanks for contributing, and hope to see you in Galway in June. Bye for now. I've forgotten where the hang up button is.